Hello and welcome back to Accessible Photography, and I am doing something completely different this week. I am doing a review of a camera. It's the X-T4, the Fujifilm X-T4, and I'm going to compare that against my good old Nikon D750. Let's see how we do. Hey, before we get started, I just want to raise three things, basically answering questions that you might have already come up with. And the first being, how has this got anything to do with accessible photography comparing cameras? Well, what it was, I will explain in the video to come, is I had a heavy camera and I wanted a lighter one so that I could walk further. That will be explained. The second is, please excuse there's like continuity errors within this overall production because it has been done over a number of weeks. And I decided not to get into the same clothes that I had that you just saw, which will match what you're going to see. And I did that over a few days and changed back into the same smelly clothes, same clothes each time. And finally, what wasn't indicated at the start of the video is this is one of my cameras and lenses ready to be picked up by a courier. I hope that didn't make too much noise in the microphone, because I'm selling one. One of the two cameras has to go, and at the end of this video I will explain which one it is and why. On with the video. So yes, we're doing a comparison today between the Fuji X-T4 and my Nikon D750. And the reason I got the Nikon D750, I've been using Nikon for quite a few years now. I had a D90, then a D7000, and then I got this one. So I tend to have a camera for 4 years and then change. So the 4 years was up on this. And would I go for another Nikon? Would I upgrade this to 850 maybe, or something similar? But what I wanted was something that wasn't quite as heavy as this. Although I can carry it like this happily, it's heavy. It's a heavy, heavy beast because it's a real quality camera. It's got waterproofing, it's a solid metal case, it's a big glass lens, and it weighs, it's too much when you're walking around, when you've got an illness that causes you to lose energy rapidly. If you decide to go, you want to go for a walk to take a photograph, you don't want to be lugging too much kit on your back. So I decided I wanted something a little bit lighter, and I went for the Fuji X-T4. Now I'm going to apologise if there's any noise coming through on the microphone, and that's because there's a neighbour's house getting renovated, and you can guarantee when you start recording some power tool is going to start up, and that means the tool, not the person. So Fuji X-T4, got this purely because of the weight. I wanted a mirrorless camera. The Nikon mirrorless cameras looked a little bit on the heavy side. They were still taking massive lenses, and it's the lenses that weigh so much. So I thought I'd try something just a little bit dinky like this. Now, there are other mirrorless cameras around, but I was drawn to this one for a particular reason, and it's the dials on the top. You have the ISO, and you have the speed, and you have a compensation, and they all rotate when you unlock them, like this. And it is very, very similar to the cameras of old that I used to use when I was younger. And when I was in my teens, in the 80s, I hankered after this camera in particular, and I now have one. And this is a Nikon FE2, and it is just stunningly beautiful. I just love it. And for some reason it didn't fire. Oh yep, there we go. So on this side you've got the ISO adjustment here and the exposure compensation, and you also have on this side the shutter speed, which is pretty much identical to this. So we've got shutter speed, ISO, and the trigger. It's fantastic. also have the f-stop adjustment on the barrel, and that actually adjusts the f-stop inside the lens, and I'll just show you that. So at this moment in time it's showing wide open at f2. No, it's not f2.8, I apologize, it's f1.8. What a marvelous lens this is. This is a little 50mm f1.8, and when you close it right up to f22, that's it closed right up to a tiny little dot that you can barely see, and that gives you a very large depth of field. And if you open it up wide, you get a very shallow depth of field, and you might even get bokeh in the background, and that's another video. That is just beautiful, and with modern cameras you very rarely see that happening. It's better to have an old camera like this to understand what the f-stop actually is and what it means and what it's actually doing, because you normally adjust with a wheel or a button and you don't really see anything happening because it doesn't happen as you see it in the lens. So this one, I just love it. I love the camera, but what I don't know is what the quality of the image really is in comparison to the Nikon, because I've never shot both cameras at the same time until now, and I've been outside. I've set up two cameras together, photographing a bicycle that I bought recently to try and get myself some exercise, and then the snow arrived. But let's have a look and see what the quality is like side by side, and I haven't seen this yet, so this is going to be a shock to me as well. Let's go and have a look at me setting up, taking the pictures, and then having a look at the results. So I set two cameras up, the old Nikon and the new Fuji, looking at my bicycle in the garden, and I have the focus point, I'm not sure if you can see, on the crossbar on each. The framing is about the same, although this one's set at 35 and this one is at just under 23, so probably about 22mm. I'm on a 60th on this one. This one is f8 at 1/60th, and the exposure is correct. This one is slightly underexposed, so I'm taking that up. This is also now at 1/60th, and I'm going to take the picture. Okay, the shutter speed was actually 40th for that one, and 1/60th for this one. It's slightly overexposed now on that one, slightly overexposed on this one, because the sun's out. Take a picture. There we go. And just so I know where I was, I'd taken two pictures at this stage there. There we go. And two pictures at that stage there. Okay. Right, now I'm going to zoom into the camera, into the bicycle, so it's full frame. Right, I want to get my focus point. Focus point's in the wrong place. So I'm moving the focus point to the middle there. Back button, focus. On that, I can check it by manual focus and it jumps in. Check my little red highlighting. Okay, Marin is fine. 3, 2, 1. So I'm looking at 50th of a second, ISO 160 f8, and 1/60th of a second, ISO 160 f8 on this one. Both of the bike quite close in. There we go. And that is my outdoor test of the cameras photographing a bike. I'd like to do a sky now, so I'm going to turn these round. Right, according to that, the exposure is perfect. According to this, the exposure is perfect. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now, I'm going to pull this one back a bit, forward a bit, to kind of match this one here. That's a bit better. The exposure does look darker on that one. The sky is better than this one. Let's change this one slightly to spot metering. So not quite spot, but it's on the sky now. Try again. All right. Going to leave it at that just now. Here we have the wide and zoomed in images from the two cameras. We now use one of the zoomed images and zoom right in so we can look at the writing on the bikes and have a look at the colour as well. This is the second image, zooming right in, having a look at the writing, which is a lot clearer in my mind, and the colour is good. So now zooming in on the wider image, and as you can see, the writing is not as clear as it was earlier because you're zooming in far more on an image. And this is the second camera, and we're zooming right in quite far and getting a still slightly blurred writing, but it's not too bad. Now this is a comparison between the two, and I would say the right hand side is better than the left, color wise and the crispness of the writing. Let's have a look at another image. This one's zoomed right in on the disc brake, and I would say on the right hand one you can read Joule or Julie quite clearly in the metalwork, and the color looks quite good, the clarity is good. So now I have the two images of the sky scenes. Now they're exposed for the sky, and the garden was very underexposed, and I brought that up, exposing what the dynamic range is like. Now let's have a little look in on this one, and you can see a bit of a fuzziness in the leaves there. The foreground's still quite dark but usable, and the trees, it's just that little fringing around the trees there, but it looks okay. Second camera, everything looks a lot more even. The tree still looks slightly fuzzy, but it's not too bad. A lot brighter in the garden scene itself, and up to the tree, and there's a little fringing in that tree as well, but it's not too bad. Beside each other, you can see quite clearly the difference in the color and the quality of the image. I'm just looking at the tree there, so you can see the dynamic range is far better on the camera on the right. And we're back here, and hopefully the sound quality is a little bit better. I've changed from the little lav mic and gone back to the Rode wireless. It might cut out every now and then, which it does, but hopefully the quality of my voice is a little better, not too deep. What was I doing just now? I was comparing two cameras, and I was showing you those side by side. So I was talking about the left hand side, the right hand side, or the first and the second, without saying which camera was which. And at the end, the last images I was taking, when I said I adjusted, I exposed for the sky and then adjusted the foreground. What I did there was I took the shadow slider and whacked it right across to the right hand side, which will be that way for you. And the comparison was quite interesting, that one camera gave me a really good dynamic range, and the other wasn't so good, and the other being the Fuji. And with the Fuji, you have to make an adjustment in the camera to get a better dynamic range. And what the adjustment is, involves taking the minimum ISO up and then selecting a percentage of dynamic range that you want. Now, there's a great video about that. I'm going to link that here so you can watch that. For me, okay, that's great. That's good. You can get a good dynamic range. I don't want the faff. Just don't want the faff. So, kind of liking the Nikon when it comes to dynamic range. I also liked the Nikon when it came to the quality of the images and the crispness of, say, the writing on the bikes. The Nikon was the one on the right hand side. the Fuji was on the left hand side. The Nikon was the second images, the second images shown compared to the first. So if you want to go back and have a look again, you can see the differences. The differences aren't great. They're small differences, but they mean a lot to me. And what really started me with this was, well, right from the beginning, the idea was to buy the Fuji, sell the Nikon, and that would pay the majority of how much that cost, so it wouldn't be too much out of pocket. I never got round to taking the sales pictures of the Nikon and putting them online and getting the boxes out of the attic and putting it all in there. I just wasn't really overly happy with what is a fabulous camera, the Fuji, and I'm not going to knock the camera. It has great features such as the focus peaking, so everything fringes red when it's in focus. That is great. It has other features, lots of other features, which are really, really, really cool, especially the wee knobs on the top. I love that. I love the look of the camera as well, the feel of the camera. But I was just never keen to get rid of the Nikon. I did a video recently, the church, and in that I actually, at the end, sneaked in a couple of pictures taken about 2 years ago with the Nikon of the same church, because I didn't want to be doing too much photography on that day. I had a friend with me, we were just basically out for a dog walk, so I brought those pictures in just to get a slightly different view of the church, make the video a little more interesting. It was a very short video, but the quality of the images on that video, you could see the difference between what was shot with the Fuji and what was shot at the end with the Nikon. So I decided to do this comparison, as in a bench test of two cameras looking at the same thing and taking the images. When I finished the bench test, I thought to myself, which camera do I want? And I got the Nikon out, and this is quite sad actually, I feel quite bad about it. I got the Nikon out and I took photographs of the Fuji. I went upstairs into the attic and I got the boxes out for the Fuji and I put it up for sale. And it didn't hurt. It didn't bring me happiness. Remember this Japanese thing of like decluttering. If you pick something up and if it doesn't give you happiness, bin it, get rid of it. The Fuji was a lovely camera. I wasn't confident in using it, so it went up for sale. It didn't sell in the places I put it, and I didn't want to waste too much more time. So you probably saw on the label MBP. So it's basically being sold to a company who will sell it on. So I've taken a massive cut to get that camera sold. I've lost many hundreds of pounds in this, I wouldn't say experiment, it was a belief that this camera was good enough for me to do what I wanted and get out there. And one of the things I found when I was using the camera, and this is quite important, is yes, it was light, but it wasn't super light. I found it made me a lazy photographer. I wasn't wanting to put on filters. I wasn't always using it on a tripod. I was putting far too much trust in the focus peaking, and actually found a couple of times when I believed things were in focus, later discovered that they weren't. There wasn't perfect focus. It would be me learning a little bit about what actually should be showing on that screen, I'm quite sure, but it wasn't giving me what I wanted, and I wasn't happy with it, and I was being lazy with it. I was using it as a snap shooter, and that is not what I want. I want a camera that I work with, that I have to think about, because it's important that I use my brain as we get older, we've all got to use our brain, and I've got to stop and think about what I'm actually doing. And I've said for a long time, even this isn't what I would like. What I actually want is a digital but manual camera. Why does it have all the extras, all the different functions? Just give us a camera, like the little Nikon that's hiding up here somewhere. And I showed you earlier where it's just there. I showed you that before with the Fuji. It's, you adjust the aperture, you adjust the speed, you adjust the ISO, and you take the picture. And you have to know photography to do that. It is fully manual. And other people don't like that, and I know that and understand that. And I respect that. For me, and when it first got, when the Nikon Digital, it was on auto all the time. But now, I always have it set to manual. Just click that round out there. I always have that set to manual. And I just love this camera. It's heavy. I'm going to have to live with that. End of story. Yes, the whole point was to get a camera that I could walk about with easier. I've just got to learn that this is what I've got, and I will have to cut down on some of the other things I'm carrying, such as I'm now carrying vlogging equipment. I've just got a new, slightly larger GoPro. I've got the drone. I've got the sound equipment. Thank God I'm not carrying lights with me. I need to reduce the weight somehow. And maybe it's going to be a case of I don't go very far from the car, but sometimes you just need to. So that's it. The Fuji has gone. A little update at the end of this. Last year I had great plans of, at the beginning of the year, what I was going to do in 2020, and we discussed that and wanted ideas of what to do. This year I'm not really making plans, but I have ideas formulating in my head, and I will be staying for 2021 in the UK, predominantly in Scotland, and I'm going to be hopefully concentrating on the west coast of Scotland. I already have a couple of holidays booked with a caravan, because you can cancel those with minimal cost, sort of thing, £1 for one and £5 for another. I am going to go away for long weekends as much as possible and take pictures. Another update is, and one of the reasons for the selling of a camera is to get funds back into my bank account, is poor Duke. He had an operation back in November, and afterwards he was a new dog. He was loving life. He's been running around like an idiot. He's been chasing deer that have long gone. He just picks up the smell and goes chasing deer with his pals. And the result of that is he's hurt his leg, so he's now due for another CT scan, which is very expensive, at the 1st of April. And I'm hoping that they don't say he needs an operation, because that's just, although he's insured, the insurance doesn't cover everything, and that's why I really need to get some money back into the bank account. I will keep you up to date with Duke, because I know a lot of you care a lot about him. Okay, and we're going to finish off by saying, when you can, get out, take pictures, and have fun.